The big issue with Comstock's magazine this month profiles millennial leadership and the changes they are driving in the region. Comstock's editor-in-chief Allison Joy and millennial leader and entrepreneur Trey Borden join us next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the capital region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Allison, Comstock's has been doing this issue for 3 years now. What have you all learned about millennials and their place in the region?
Well, I think one of the primary things we've learned over the years is that readers, young and old, what they respond to isn't necessarily a young person who's climbed the traditional hierarchy really quickly. What they respond to are young people who are identifying problems and coming up with unique ways to solve them. And that might not always be a CEO or a vice president. It could be someone who started their own company and they're on the grassroots, but they're really having an impact on their communities. And I think that's really important to the region, and people see that.
Trey, is there a redefinition of what leadership really is by your generation?
I think that for people in my generation, leadership is a lot more collaborative. I think that beforehand, leaders are just the most exceptional, and they kind of guide everyone else's behavior. I think that our generation really understands that you can't do it alone, and you don't want to, because you kind of want that really diverse and kind of multidisciplinary team with you. And so I think collaboration is key.
And if you were to think about some of the happenings and most exciting projects and initiatives going on in the region, is there, other than collaboration, are there other hallmarks of how it is that millennials work together that is new or different than what we've experienced before?
I think that for some of my most inspiring millennial cohort, really trailblazing, really not having any idea how to do something and doing it anyway, I think is a hallmark of the most exciting projects. A lot of the people that I know don't have a lot of institutional support. They don't have a very clear blueprint from how to get to A to D or Z, but they're just gonna, see what B looks like and then go from there. And I think that willingness to take a risk and be the first one to do it is an essential quality.
Allison, your readership is typically thought of as being some of those more hierarchical leaders within this region. What is your readership yearning to understand about this new emerging generation?
Well, they want to know how to keep them in jobs longer than they have a reputation of staying. That's actually one of the hardest, that's the hardest news to break, is that that's not quite what it's about. You hear a lot how millennials or young professionals are staying in jobs 2-3 years, whereas before, you were looking at 10 or 15. And people want to know, well, how can we get them to stay? Well, there are things you can do to attract young talent, right? Like have your internal system sort of up to date, technologically advanced. Young professionals, they really have short patience with inefficiencies, and because of this sort of desire to problem solve, like they're going to come in, they're like, why are we doing things this way? So that's a way to retain them, but I think it's more about making sure you're getting as much out of them as you can while they're with you, and understanding that the career pathway for them isn't maybe what it was for someone of prior generations.
Though, what that raises, what your statement almost implies, is don't expect a lot of loyalty out of this generation because they tend to be more nomadic.
There is a little bit of truth to that statement. I will say that.
And maybe loyalty is not necessarily deserved all the time.
Well, and
good point.
That's also true. But I think that loyalty looks different, right? I know a lot of friends or people of my generation who maybe moved on from jobs but still consulted with their former employer. It's not about leaving someone behind necessarily, but they really put a high value on their own personal, professional development. And once they feel like maybe they're not learning anymore and they're not evolving anymore, they will go look for opportunities elsewhere. So as a business, what you can do is you can keep them learning and keep them evolving, and that will sort of extend your runway. But I think it's also about getting the most out of them while you have them, because we're hard workers. We want to take on a lot. We're always looking to learn something new. And if you can present those opportunities, you can keep someone around longer.
The whole concept of social entrepreneurship, which has really come to the fore in the last few years, is one that seems to be tailor-made for the millennial generation, in that there seems to be both a concern about doing well, people want to be successful, but really about lifestyle and doing good and giving something back. How is it that you're seeing that projects or initiatives or even businesses are coming together where it is that it comprises both, your personal aspiration, but also more of a civic commitment?
Well, we're passion driven, right? We really want to be committed to what we're doing, which is why oftentimes we're willing to do it for far less compensation than we deserve, and we're willing to make it up as we go and kind of go through these hurdles, is because we care about it. And I think that for the people that I work with most commonly, we want to be a part of our community. We want what we're doing not to just matter to us and uplift us, but also have a regional impact that makes the world a better place. And that sounds kind of trite, but really, we know that we are really blessed in a lot of ways to not be so overcommitted and have a lot of responsibilities that your generation kind of took on as just the course of doing business.
What motivates you? What are you passionate about?
I am passionate about really unlocking the potential of my community, whether that means uplifting the most talented artists that I can, whether it's spotlighting an area that could really be a catalyst for change and making that animated. I think that really unlocking kind of unforeseen opportunities is something that drives me. And Sacramento offers a lot of opportunity to do just that.
Well, that really raises a question for me, because what I really want to know is, why did you stay? Or why did you come back home to Sacramento? For years, Sacramento has had this reputation as backwards and sleepy and all the rest of it. And you left, went away to Harvard.
Yale. Don't
Yale.
be funny.
Just wanted to see if you
Not
were
that it
awake.
matters.
Just wanted to see if you were awake. Went away and decided to come back. And either one of you could have chosen anywhere in the country or the world to live. You're back here. Why here?
I mean, to be frank, I didn't have any intention of coming back. I kind of came here with the intention of studying for business school, taking my GMAT, and getting the heck out of here. Because my impression of Sacramento had been calcified in high school. So a lot of my friends who kind of had any option chose to leave, see something new, see something exciting. And so it wasn't until I returned here for the first time in 7 or so years that I said, Sacramento's a lot different than when I left. And
How so?
well, there was more going on. There was people who were being entrepreneurial. There was actually a kind of cool vibe that was happening in Midtown, and just so many things I just had no idea about were already here. And so for someone like me who had lived in New York and lived abroad and kind of knew about what other cities were doing, you saw this opportunity, this kind of unmet potential here, where if you know how to collaborate, if you know how to seek out who the decision makers are, there's not a lot of barriers to entry. And so right off the bat, I started working for Mayor Johnson as a fellow. I wasn't going to be able to walk into Bloomberg's office and say, hey, look at me, and have anything taken seriously. But here there was a chance to really shape what our identity was as a region and what initiatives were going to be successful. And so for anyone coming in here with any kind of entrepreneurial inkling, this was a place where you could kind of be on the ground floor. And for me,
Is that what you're hearing as well, Allison?
Absolutely. A recent editor's letter I wrote focused on this exact topic because I'm a transplant. I came here as a Wisconsin farm girl with a pit stop in Tokyo. And when I came here, I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted media to look like. And I was able to find an entry point into that. I started at Sac Press, which was doing some really interesting things at that time. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity living on the outskirts of Tokyo. And those things weren't really happening that I was experiencing in some of my local cities. So I came out here to help my younger brother get settled in his first job out of college. And I stayed because this community, this region offered me something that I hadn't quite seen elsewhere.
The opportunity to sort of create one's life and the low barriers to entry that you speak of, Trey, it's sort of almost counterintuitive from what most people think about. And if someone is considering relocating to Sacramento right now, what do you think is the value proposition that we have to sell right now to the millennial generation?
That you can come here and that you can have an impact, that this city is sort of, and this region is really going through, it's evolving into something different. It's growing its sort of national profile. There's a lot of exciting things happening with food systems and tech, and you can get in on the ground floor here with companies or with organizations that you might have to spend 3-4 years fighting to get into a major city. And I mean, that's how I draw people here. And I've actually had a couple friends from, Wisconsin who maybe have relocated out east who just weren't happy. And I said, hey, come here. This is exciting. And I think that is Sacramento's and the Capital Region's sort of main selling point, is that things are happening and you can be a part of it.
And I just want to jump in there because I think that what's interesting is I think the value proposition is really apparent to people like Allison, people who have come from somewhere else, check out this community with maybe very unclear, very even low expectations and say, wow, I had no idea what was kind of going on here. Mm-hmm. And the people like me who grew up here are the real hard ones to convince. I have had friends visit from China, from New York, all over the world, and they come here and they're like very pleasantly surprised. And they said, no, I just had no clue. It's only now that the people from here who are still living here are also getting excited. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why this momentum is a little bit more tangible, because you're not just seeing kind of people coming from San Francisco and saying, wow, like, how does no one know about this? You're having Sacramento start to own it. And I think what's really great is you're seeing Sacramento not becoming like other places. It's really growing into itself. And I think that's why you're going to see this momentum last and be significant.
Maybe your generation is teaching my generation and those before me a little bit about owning Sacramento, because the Sacramento that I grew up in was always looking over its shoulder and comparing itself as missing something as compared to, whether San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, whatever you have. And the one thing that I'd love your reaction to is it does seem that you all are almost embodying sort of the Dorothy strategy, is that there is really no place like home, and that this is a pretty great place if we stop trying to be something that we're not, or aspiring to be something that we're not, and just be really the best of what we are.
And that's really how any city's done it. I mean, Portland wasn't concerned about New York. Austin wasn't either. It was like, we're doing our own weird thing and we don't care. And my friend Greta, who's filming a movie here, she said, the parties you want to go to are the parties that are going to happen regardless of whether you come. If they don't care if you stop by or not, they're having a great time. That's the one you want to go to.
That's a great
and that's
line.
what really successfully, branded cities have done. They don't really care what the trends are. They're being weird and they're doing it. And if you don't care, then they don't care. And I think Sacramento is finally confident, or it's starting to be confident enough to say, we're Sacramento. If you don't know about it, too bad. And that's a really confident stance that we haven't had the swagger for yet, and it's coming. It's here.
And then you end up with people like me here who we're great brand ambassadors for the region. Like, I didn't come to Sacramento expecting Sacramento to be I didn't have any preconceived notion of what I was getting into. And at the time I came out here, I was thinking, I want to end up in somewhere like Portland or, Philadelphia, or, maybe even going back to Milwaukee. But I found what I was looking for here. And people ask me all the time, why are you still there? And it's a great opportunity to say, well, there's exciting things happening here. No matter what your niche is, I feel like something is happening in this city that, it throws a wide net to people interested in a variety of industries.
Well, let's talk about that wide net, because one thing that I'd love to get your perspective on is how we're doing in terms of really integrating this generation into the leadership structure and sort of the thought leadership structure as well of this region. How are we doing with that?
I think I've seen some increased momentum, especially in the past couple years, in terms of how do we transition these young professionals into more traditional leadership roles if they're kind of throwing that traditional way of doing things out the window. What happens in my company when I need to transition a new CEO. And so I think that leadership organizations play a really big role in that. I know that a lot of my peers, we do a lot of peer mentoring, and that's great, and then we get a lot out of it. But I think it's important to people in my position to reach out to people who are the older generation, the people who can kind of provide some context, because even though we have maybe a different way of thinking, a different way of doing things, there is still some value in that hierarchy. And
Thank you. God bless you.
Right?
yeah, it's not, and
Not
I
obsolete.
think, and I think as we get older, we will come to realize that, because they're, when you're throwing a lot of things at the wall, which is, I think, what young professionals like to do. In tech, you call it agile development, right? You don't just you don't do all of your research and all your planning up front and then expect to release a completely polished product. You do it through phases and you get feedback, right? Like, that's how we like to do things. And I think, once we start getting into our early mid-30s, we're realizing there's a lot of value in the way things have done and how what we've experienced can be applied to that for the greater good.
Well, just as a response, folks from your generation teach folks like me a lot just by association. And so I've always felt that integration gives as much to us as anything that we're giving back. So I guess what I want to know, though, is that from your perspective, Trey, you're an African-American male who is invited into a lot of rooms that typically not many folks get into. Do those rooms increasingly look like the demographics of our community, or is there a big difference between the community that you're active in every day and those leadership rooms?
I think definitely there is. I mean, especially coming from some of the other places I lived, Sacramento has a lot of diversity. And it's one of its kind of selling points when you go and talk to people. Sacramento is so diverse, but we don't often do a great job of integrating these silos. We have a lot of kind of, as a whole, diversity. But yeah, when you're going to those rooms where someone's funding a project or someone's greenlighting something or someone's taking a chance on something that's not really figured out, it's the same established people who've been there who are mainly male, mainly white. I'm Black and gay going into rooms all the time having to sell them on things that they've never done. And so I think that part of what our generation really values is diversity, because if you don't have a woman, if you don't have a minority, if you don't have someone, if your team does not represent a very broad set of perspectives and experiences, you're not responding to market pressure. You're not responding to the needs of a diverse community. And I think that, happily, organizations that even are very, very conservative and traditional are starting to recognize that. When I got YP of the Year, this is from our Metro Chamber, which is not known as being the most progressive and liberal organization ever, but if even they are recognizing that these millennials who are going out and doing things on their own, that shows a willingness to kind of get with the times and celebrate the things that are making our community unique. And indeed, those things attract the people who will populate these businesses, both as consumers and as employees.
And is part of it, for the Metro Chamber and organizations like that to celebrate young professionals, is that as much about, the concept of survival as it is being enlightened?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that we both need each other. It should be a symbiotic relationship. So, but I hope there's a degree of enlightenment to it, because there has been a lack of, like you said, it's been predominantly white males. We need more women. We need more minorities. And a young professional will judge accordingly. If there is a lack of that, they will be unlikely to affiliate themselves with the organization. So there does need to be some awareness from the top that we're not just going to bring this diversity with us. We need you to pursue it as well.
So what initiatives in the region are really going on that you think are doing a good job of starting to, to use a term that is often used with millennials, where these collisions are taking place and we're starting to get this cross-pollination that both of you are speaking of?
I think our co-working spaces are doing a great job. We have such, and each one of them has a sort of unique identity, I think. And you'll meet people who work at multiple co-working spaces because each one brings them something different. So I think.
Really?
I think that's
I've never heard of that before.
You go to Hacker Lab, and if you want to, use a laser cutter or 3D printer, whereas Urban Hive, it's a really large common area. The offices are for collaboration as well. So that's where you go to, meet people. So I think, and then you're seeing, you've got Inno Grove now and Elk Grove. You're seeing co-working spaces pop up not just in, the central city, but in the surrounding region. And I think that, and that really appeals to young solopreneurs, like Trey, you worked out of the Urban Hive.
Yeah, and I have a membership at Hacker Lab as well.
Exactly.
So I mean, I'm one of those people.
Exactly. And so that is, in terms of drawing young talent, they're looking for places where it's really straightforward. Like, I feel like if I go to one of these places, even if, I've never walked into Cap City, which I have, like, I feel confident that I'm going to run into someone who is going to at least change how I'm thinking about things or offer, a fresh perspective. So I think definitely our co-working community is a huge asset.
Anything that you can also think of that are some of the best initiatives that we've got going in the region?
I mean, I think that really in terms of formal initiatives, there's leadership organizations, obviously, Nehemiah, there's a lot that kind of help to directly contribute to making these collisions happen. And not just collisions, but the celebration of these collisions. I think that just as important as them happening is us showcasing them and saying, this is what's working. These are people that are doing things for the region that we want to hold up as examples. And I think that especially when we talk about leadership and leadership transitions, a lot of these relationships are one-to-one. And Sacramento is a community that, even though it has a lot of people, it has a kind of city vibe, it's really quite small when you get down to who the people are that are doing things. And so I think, it's really important to document what works and show that to a wider group of people who are in those rooms.
You just raised something that's really fascinating to me. It's leadership transitions, okay? Now, we baby boomers think of ourselves as eternal, right? Keith Richards is still playing guitar.
Yeah, sometimes it plays out.
Sometimes you have to wonder if there's a pulse there, right? But we tend to think of ourselves as eternally young. A struggle that is talked about a lot is not facilitating transitions, leadership transitions well. I know that you all are working on some things related to having those conversations. Where are those conversations going?
Well, I mean, recently we recorded a podcast with Comstocks.
We launched our podcast, and the first topic was mentorship and leadership transitions. And we had a great conversation, not just about, it's not the transition when it needs to happen. It's preparing for the transition ahead of time. It's making sure you're getting those people involved in the decision-making process, not just for a potential new leader's perspective, but also for the company as a whole. They see you kind of bringing in your top young leaders to figure out how the company works, and so when it comes time to change over, that's not you're not starting from scratch.
A shock to the system.
Right, exactly. It's not an abrupt transition. So I think that's really important. And I know that the older generation, like you said, you're eternal. You're never going anywhere. But so you don't have to be ready to move to Florida and retire in order to start this transition. It's not about letting go. It's about inclusion and bringing people into the process. So when that time comes, you're prepared.
That's a really great point. It's not about letting go. It's about inclusion. And
then letting go.
In other words, ultimately,
it's about that. Well, I mean, I think that it's true, and I think that not only having someone who is at the top mentoring the bottom, but also facilitating within an organization how people can learn from one another. One of the things that came up in the podcast was peer mentorship. And to be honest, some of the people I go to first when I am dealing with a decision or a branding problem or where I'm going to get resources from, I'm calling the people I'm talking to on Facebook all day.
Mm-hmm.
Half my business transactions go between friends or friends of friends that I've met on these social media platforms and in a very informal way between people who can vouch for me and know me. And so I think that any leader who wants his organization to be robust will not only help the bottom, but will say, hey, people help each other, and that's cross-organization, that's intra. Mm-hmm. I think that Sacramento is a place where that happens a lot, where I can call Allison, or she can call Sophie, or I can call the head of the Hacker Lab, and we're all getting beers at the end of the week.
So other than things like the Hacker Lab and the Hive and all these other types of co-working spaces, is there other infrastructure that we need to be building in order to support more of this collaboration, more of this new way of people interacting with each other?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I certainly think there could be more of an infrastructure around funding. I mean, because I think that one thing that, an older generation looks to us to do is have all the ideas and we have all the time and we're really, really hungry, so we'll do all the work. and we'll do it for, just to have the joy of accomplishing it.
We love that, and we also love you to work 18 hours a day.
Right, and we're willing to do it, but at the end of the day, when you can't put together your own resources, it becomes very difficult to pursue these passion projects. In Sacramento, I think one of the drawbacks of its history is that this is a government town. People are used to thinking of jobs as something you do, and we think of jobs as who you are. And so we're a lot less willing to do something we hate for the sake of resources. But I think that the things that make Sacramento so compelling are those things that are really passion driven. And so building some network of support where we understand there's an economic output to that would be something that would encourage more collaboration for sure.
And we're going to leave it there. Thank you both.
Okay.
And that's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Sypax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.